Today, we're going to talk about the will. And so, when we talk about the will in Scripture, there are three different words that are used interchangeably, but they all point to the same dimension. The words are will, heart, or spirit. And those are not three different things biblically. They're three different ways of naming the same dimension, the same part of you. So the will and the heart are the same thing. For example, when the Bible talks about the heart of a person, it rarely references the actual physical organ that's pumping blood through your body. And it's almost never talking about your emotions. And that surprises people because, in our culture, when someone says, follow your heart, what they're really saying is follow your feelings, which is not wise. Because our heart emotions in that sense can be very deceptive. They're not meant to be drivers for us. In the biblical worldview, the heart is the seat of the will. It's the place where you make choices. It's where your character is located. It's where you make your deepest commitments. It's where you make your covenants. That's why Proverbs 4 says, above everything else, guard your heart, because everything flows from it. So that's a statement about our will. That's not about our emotions. Proverbs is saying, guard your decision-making center. Guard what you're orienting your life around. Now, the third word that's used interchangeably for will, it's not just heart in Scripture, it's also spirit. And specifically, when that word spirit is in reference to a person. Not God's spirit, but a person's spirit that's talking about the same dimension, our will. Jesus used it in particular on the night of his arrest. He asked his three closest disciples, Peter, James, and John, to pray with him throughout the night. And he found his disciples sleeping in the garden instead. And he said to them, the spirit, that is the will, your will, is willing, but the flesh is weak. And that word translated spirit that he used there is the command center, the will, or the heart. It was the part of Peter, James, and John that genuinely wanted to pray with Jesus all night. Their will, their spirit was oriented towards that. It's what they desired, but their body was exhausted, and their body undermined their will. So my point is this: when you see the word heart in Scripture, think about will, agency, your command center. When you see the word spirit in reference to a person, same thing. They're all pointing to this one dimension. The will is the command center of your inner life. It's where your moral agency is located. The will is where you make binary decisions. You either decide yes or no. I'm going to choose this or I'm going to choose that. God gave us what we call a free will. It's absolutely autonomous. I would say it's the most sacred part of who we are, because it's where we meet God. It's where we choose God or we don't choose God. I'm so grateful that he gave me a free will, that I'm not some automaton that just goes based upon programming and commands, but he gave me agency, and that's located in our will. And so these three words are all talking about the same thing. Now, in the 5D, as we've been going through this series, we have interwoven a lot of teaching around the will, and so I'm not going to repeat that today. I'm going to focus on some new content in relation to our will. But the way it's supposed to be, if we were to put this in a proper order of the way a healthy, ordered, integrated person, the way they would function, it would look more like this. Our higher power is our organizing center of our life. And how we understand God's relationship to us and to our will in particular is going to determine everything about your recovery, everything about your spiritual life. What you're seeing here is the architecture of a person who is living the way God designed us to live. So God, our higher power, he's the center. He's the organizing principle of your life. And then you have your soul, which is your entire integrated self, is submitted to your higher power. And then your will is submitted to your soul. What that means is your choices, your free will, is governed by the deepest values that are held in your soul that are submitted to God's will. Your will was meant to govern everything else: your mind, your body, your relationships. When that order is intact, you have integrity. That word integrity comes from the root word integer, a whole number, a whole person. You're integrated. You're not disordered. You're not compartmentalized. You're not fragmented. You're not living a duplicitous life, but everything is in its proper order. This is health. This is integration. This is integrity. Now, one thing that's a really key point here that I want to emphasize is that God is a gentleman in the sense that he's not going to violate your will. He'll never violate your will. He gave you your agency, and he doesn't operate by being some kind of cosmic dictator and he overrides your will. God makes it really clear in scripture that he invites, that he calls, that he woos even. And it's epitomized in one particular verse where it says in Revelation chapter 3, referring to Jesus, "Behold, I stand at the door and I knock." Well, what's that door? It's the door of your will. He's knocking. He's a gentleman. He doesn't override your agency. He doesn't break and enter, but he knocks and he waits and he knocks and he waits. That's why we call him a higher power in recovery language, because he is above us in power and he has the ability to do for us what we cannot do for ourselves, but he will only do it through our consent, or what we call surrender. That's when our will chooses to yield to his will. A perfect model of this was demonstrated by Jesus. That same night that he was wanting to pray with Peter, James, and John in the garden before his murder, his prayer to his Father was this. He said, "If you're willing, remove this cup of suffering that I know I'm about to face. If you're willing, can we skip this? Nevertheless, not my will, but yours be done." Here in one sentence, Jesus modeled the most integrated, healthy act a human being can perform. It was the alignment of the human part of him and his will with the divine will. It was congruence. Now, he had a genuine human preference. His body did not prefer to go through what he was about to go through. He did not want what was waiting for him, but he submitted that preference to the will of his Father. And that is a great picture. I don't know how else to illustrate what a healthy will looks like than this sentence right here. Not my will, but your will be done. Now, I know some of you come from a home where your father, I'll put it this way. I know on this call right now, there is represented a lot of father wounds, perhaps every single one of us, where our relationship with our father, no matter how great he was, there were some shortcomings. And those of us who are dads, we can humbly admit the same thing. Some of you had a father who was harsh. Some of you had a father that was distant, wasn't really engaged in your life. Some of you had a father that was very punitive. He was a severe disciplinarian. Some of you had an absent father. Whatever your experience was, I want to validate that. I bring that up because research tells us that our primary image of God is shaped more than any other experience by our experience with our earthly dad. If your dad was distant, God can feel distant. If your dad was angry, God feels like this mad tyrant in your life. We've talked about this before, but I want to briefly remind us how God is actually revealed in Scripture. These three characteristics. He's here, he's able, he's good. He's a good father. He doesn't match our experience necessarily with our earthly father, but he's able and he's good. He's here, meaning he's present with us right now. This same omnipresent God is with you right now in your room. Yet at the same time, he's with me and he's with everyone else on the call. But it's not enough for him to just be here, because if he's not able, then he can't really do anything for us. He's here, and that's comforting, but he's not just here, he's able, meaning he has all the power that we don't have. But if he was just able, we don't have any comfort. Or if he was just able, but he's not good, then we can't trust him. But the fact is, he is good. He is for you. He's not against you. He demonstrated his mysterious, miraculous love for you by sacrificing his own son. And that is the evidence, the demonstration of his love for you and his love for me. So God in Scripture is all three of these. He's here right now. He is able to do what you can't, and he is good. And he's inviting you to submit your will to him, not as a dictator and not as a command, but as an invitation from a loving father. So for our recovery to go deep, if we want to have genuine transformation, here's the foundational question right now, where you sit. Do you actually trust these three attributes of your higher power? Do you authentically believe that he is here right now? He is able and he's good. I would suggest that everything else in your recovery is going to depend on that answer to that question. So here's the question that takes us into a deep dive when it comes to our will / heart / spirit today. If God designed our will for surrender, for integrity, why does our will go so catastrophically wrong so often? And I would suggest that the answer to that turns out to be more nuanced than we realize. In the context of betrayal recovery on both sides of that experience, the betrayer and the betrayed, there are actually two very different things that are happening to the will. And they're not the same problem. And they don't have the same solution. And if we treat these two issues as identical, we can do some unnecessary harm. So here's the question I want to wrestle with for a minute. Is there a difference between our will, if it chose to do wrong, or our will that became enslaved by doing wrong? And it changes what recovery looks like. So I'm going to identify this as two different kinds of will: the captive will and the corrupted will. And let's look at this contrast. Two different conditions, two different problems, two different solutions, but they all deal with the same dimension of our life. What's happening in the will of the betrayer, and what has happened to the will of the betrayed? For the betrayer, I'm going to call it corrupted will. And for the betrayed, I'm going to call it captive will. So let's just look at the contrast. For the betrayer, he chose this behavior. He chose it repeatedly to the point that it co-opted and corrupted his will, his command center. Whereas for the betrayed partner, she did not choose this. This was something that was done to her that captivated her will. For the betrayer, our will was formed towards disorder. For the betrayed partner, her will was attacked. It was manipulated. It was managed. It was acted upon by us. For the betrayer, he's going to need complete transformation of his desires, the desire of his will. They're going to have to be completely replaced because they were corrupted. Whereas for the betrayed partner, what her will needs is freedom, to be liberated, to restore a sense of agency in her life. For the betrayer, what recovery looks like for him is to have a newly formed will. But recovery for the betrayed is reclaiming the voice of her will. For the betrayer, what is needed is surrender. Just like the prayer of Jesus, not my will, but yours be done. And we surrender our will to his will, believing that he is here, able, and good. So it's safe to submit to him. However, for the betrayed partner, there is actually a biblical concept of justice, of protest. And we're going to dive deeper into this today. Here's the critical point. The corrupted will for the betrayer, it needs more than just extra willpower. It needs transformation. It needs renovation. It needs a complete reorientation of what the will wants because it's been corrupted. So not just more information, but transformation. For the betrayed partner, her captive will, it doesn't need the same renovation or transformation or a replacement of her desires. It already wants the right things. It needs liberation. It needs justice to be restored. So both parties, both sides of the room, have a will that has been impacted. But the nature of that impact is different, and we can't treat it the same. Let's put it into a deeper context. The deception that happened from us betrayers was not only a sin against our higher power, not only did we go against our own values, and it was a sin against the covenant that we had with our partner, the relational agreement, and we violated it. But we also need to understand another layer to this, that the deception was a direct attack on her will. This is what I mean by this. Our will functions through consent. Every single one of us, we make decisions based on our understanding of reality. So she chose who to trust. She chose where to invest her life. She chose who to love and how to love. She chose what risk to take based upon her consent of a reality that wasn't accurate. Her reality was being curated and managed, distorted, and controlled by. So when we maintain a parallel reality and we don't offer shared reality, when we have a secret compartment in our life that they don't even know about, that was not simply keeping a secret from our partner. We were systematically removing her ability to exercise her own free will with accurate information. And men, I want us to just hold the weight of this for a moment. She was making decisions, lifelong decisions, financial decisions, emotional investments in you, sexual decisions with all of her dimensions of who she is based on a reality that did not exist. So when we were living with a secret sexual basement, our partners were not just deceived emotionally or sexually. Her entire framework of reality was being manipulated by us. Her sense of what is true, what is safe, what is real, all of it was being shaped by us. And we had a completely different map of reality than she did. The point is, this is not just a relationship wound. It's not just a wound to the coupleship. We wounded her will, because a free will, can only function as freely as the reality it is given to work with. So for the betrayed partners, you were given a false reality that you made decisions in, and your will was captive. It was undermined by someone else's deception. For the betrayers, this is one of the heaviest things that we have to reckon with, that the harm that we caused to our partner wasn't just the relationship. We stole something from her. For many of us, we have to admit that we stole years of her will being able to operate freely. And we can't make that right by just apologizing. How we can address it is by a radical, ongoing commitment to creating and maintaining shared reality, and to never have a parallel world again, to never manage the story for her. Zero tolerance for omissions of reality, so that we can honor her and we can honor her will to begin to function freely again the way it's supposed to be. She should be fully informed about her reality. It's what we call shared reality. That is not optional. That's how we offer restorative justice to her. She gets her reality back, and it's a shared reality, and it's not a false reality. And now she has her will and her agency back because she's dealing with truth. So we've talked about submission. We've talked about surrender. Not my will, but your will be done. And that is a healthy anchor for our will. But there's another posture that the Bible talks about that is also healthy for our will. And it is just as faithful as submission and surrender. And the Bible calls it lament. So let me describe what lament is. Lament is not just despair. Lament is where our will, in a crisis and in pain and in trauma, our will turns towards God, not away from God. And we cry out to God for justice, because he's a God of justice. Remember, he's here, he's able, and that third thing, he's good. And we say to this God who is here, able, and good, this is not right. I need you to intervene. I need you to act. I need you to show up. And I'm not going to pretend that I have peace that I don't have. And one of the most well-known and relevant laments in Scripture, especially for something like betrayal trauma, is found in Psalm 13. It begins with a lament. It begins with this phrase, how long? How long? Are you going to forget me forever? How long are you going to hide your face from me? How long must I have sorrow in my heart and my soul all day long? How long? That's not a lack of faith. That's not turning away from God in bitterness. It's turning towards God in lament. God gave us the lament psalms for that very reason, so that we can come to him with our broken heart. This is your will being fully engaged with God, and your will is refusing to pretend like everything's okay. And your will is demanding justice and crying out for his presence and his intervention. The lament psalms are meant to be prayers from a person whose world has been shattered. And they're not going to insult God or themselves by performing some kind of false peace or false forgiveness that's not really there. let's talk about false peace. It's a counterfeit form of spiritual maturity. And sometimes we actually accidentally, I think, teach this in recovery. It sounds something like this. Yes, he betrayed me, but I've forgiven him. I've surrendered it to God, and I have peace. And I don't want to dismiss that. Sometimes that's real. But sometimes, especially if you're in early recovery or if there is repeated betrayal going on, what that can actually be is your will as the betrayed. It has been conditioned. It has learned that it is not safe to protest, to lament. Your will has been trained to be silent. The voice of your will has either been dismissed by the betrayer, or it's been minimized, or you were punished if you gave it a voice. So for the betrayed partners, the Lament Psalms gives you permission to protest, and to protest straight to God. To say to him, how long? To bring the full weight of what happened to you to God. And you don't sanitize it first. You bring it raw and real. That is not a lack of faith. I would argue that that is mature faith. Part of the recovery of your will, releasing it from the captivity of deception, is learning that your will has a voice and welcoming that voice back into your authentic self and bringing it to God. And here's what makes lament different from bitterness. Lament turns towards God. Bitterness turns away from God. Don't allow bitterness to come into your heart, but God welcomes your lament. Now, that same song we were just looking at, I want you to see how it ends. David, in his crisis, in his pain from brokenness, he goes from saying, how long, how long, how long? Same psalm, same author, same crisis, same brokenness and pain. He goes from saying, how long are you going to forget me? To saying, I have trusted in your steadfast love. Saying, I trust that you're good. And he didn't resolve the pain before he could trust. He trusted while the pain was still there. That was his will that was under lament. Things weren't completely resolved, but he also wasn't performing. It was authentic. He was choosing God despite the pain. Now, for those of us who have betrayed our partners, there is still a posture of lament that we can do as well, but it looks different from our partners. It's not lament over our own pain. It's what we would call remorse. It's vicarious lament. It's lament over her pain. That requires us to genuinely grieve the harm that we caused her, not what we lost, what she lost, and to sit with that and to truly mourn with her. Ecclesiastes says there's a time to weep and there's a time to mourn. For us, when our partner is grieving and they're lamenting, we're invited into that season with her as a time of mourning. And your will, your free will, has to choose to do that, because it's not an emotion, it's a movement, it's a posture. And it won't come naturally. You have to choose to do it. So this is what it looks like. Two people in two different kinds of lament, crying out to God. For the betrayer, the vicarious lament, he's mourning the harm that was done. He's not mourning his own exposure of the secret basement. He's mourning for her. Whereas what she's doing in her own personal lament is protesting to God. She's bringing the brokenness to God. In his vicarious lament, he's letting her grief land on him without defending self or collapsing into shame. Whereas in her lament, she is refusing any kind of pseudo or fake or performed peace that hasn't arrived yet. For him, lament can be choosing to witness her loss as an empathic witness and not trying to manage it or soften it or manipulate it. or make it stop. Whereas for her, her lament is that how long, bringing that directly to God. For his lament, this is actually work that you're doing with your will, with your command center. You are choosing grief, whether you feel it or not. You're choosing to join her in her lament. But this is also, for the betrayed partner, work on her own will, where she's reclaiming the voice of her will and she's crying out for justice. So let's close this content today with something that I think ruins a lot of recovery for a lot of people on both sides of the room. It's this belief from both the men and the women that transformation is an event instead of a process. It's believing that I had this one moment that was a very real experience. And I've had some of those moments where I have this God encounter, or I have this breakthrough, or I have this incredible insight. And we can tend to believe, both the men and the women, that that is transformation. And I'm not saying that God doesn't meet us in those moments, and I'm not saying that those moments aren't real. What I am saying is our will, our heart, our spirit, that dimension of who we are, takes deep structural reordering. It doesn't happen in a moment. It happens over months and years of submitting to God over and over and over again. Romans 12 puts it this way: do not be conformed to this world, but be transformed by a process, not an event. What's the process? The renewing of your mind. So that by testing, you may discern what God's will is. His will is always good, acceptable, perfect, and we can submit to his will. That word transformed in Romans 12, it's the word in Greek, metamorpho, where we get the word metamorphosis. It is the picture of a caterpillar becoming a butterfly. And a caterpillar does not decide to become a butterfly and then bam, it's a butterfly. Instead, it enters this long process of a complete transformation, a complete interior reorganization. And what emerges is genuinely different. It's not that he's trying harder not to be a caterpillar. He's become something completely different. So for us betrayers, what this means is your partner does not owe you trust because you had some kind of breakthrough moment. And I'm not saying that moment wasn't real for you. What I'm saying is it was just a beginning. The transformation of our will takes months and years of consistent new behavior that is observable by your partner and others. And it is not unfair of her to wait for that process and to not put a lot of stock in a moment that you had. She's actually being very wise. For the betrayed partners, I don't want you to think that your healing is a failure if you had a breakthrough moment 3 days ago, and then today you're back in grief or anger or confusion. That's still metamorphosis. It's a process. It's not linear. It's not neat. Your will does not heal in the order that you wish that it would. So for both sides of the room, your recovery is not failing just because it's taking a long time. That's metamorphosis. That's transformation. It's not fast. It's not a moment. The formation of your will is not quick. So the question is not, why isn't this done yet? The question is this: am I still in the process? Is my will still oriented towards God, towards truth, towards healing? Am I believing that he is here, able and good? If yes, you're right where you're supposed to be. You're in the middle of a process. In summary, here's what I want to leave you with today: 4 short truths. Number 1, Your will can be corrupted by what you practiced in the basement. Your will can also be captive to what was done to you. And the remedy is not the same for both, but God is sufficient for both. Number two, the deception was not just a sin against God. It was an attack of our partner's will. Therefore, shared reality is not an option if we want repair and healing. It is how she gets her will back. It's restorative justice. Number three, lament is not a lack of faith. If our will protests to God because of the betrayal, that is your will still trusting Him. And you don't have to fake peace that you haven't experienced yet. And finally, one breakthrough moment, one moment of insight, one decision that you make does not transform your will. It's a process, and you're in the middle of the process. Your will, this dimension that God gave you, is sacred. God gave it to you as a gift. I think it's the most precious gift He gave us. If He didn't give us free will, there would be no such thing as love. Love would be impossible. If we have no choice, we can't choose love. Our free will is what makes love real. And because our will is a sacred part of who we are, it can also cause incredible damage when it's disordered, when it's misdirected. The betrayal that every single one of us are living through on both sides of the room, at its root, it's a story about the will. We men, we had a will that was not submitted to God. It was not submitted to our values. It was not governed by truth. It was governed by false beliefs. And so the wreckage is evidence of that. But that same will, that same dimension of who you are that produced the harm, if we submit it to God, if we align it with truth now, if our will is fueled by a vision of a new life, that will, that same instrument that did so much damage, can also do repair. It can also be transformed. Our will can enter into a new covenant with God and a new covenant with our partner. That happens in the space of our will. Your will is your greatest asset, but it was meant to be submitted to God's will.